It's Wellness Wednesdays. It's Wellness Wednesdays. And I make this video very hesitantly, but I think it'll be useful for some people. Because people are losing their minds right now. People are scared. And I'm making this video just to give people a sense of reassurance that they are not crazy. The approaches and tactics that many people, even people you respect, are using are wrong. And there is a better way. I'm making this video because I believe in solutions. I believe that we can actually make things better, not by force, but by influence. And I believe that persuasion is always more effective than coercion. Coercion, all you can do is get somebody to shut up. You're not going to change their mind, and you're not going to make a friend. So if you like this sort of content that I suspect will get somewhat trolled and misconstrued, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Cares session for somebody who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/Leanna K, or GoFundMe for our groups that we are in the process of coordinating the startup for right now. Yeah, more on that on Friday. So, okay. The reason I'm taking this as a what not to do video is because I already talked about how to have difficult conversations last week. And the to-dos are vague. The don't do this is a lot simpler. I made notes because I want to keep this video a little bit shorter. This is based on conversations I've had in the past week. So these are actual examples of things people have done, and I want to talk about why it's not productive. Don't begin a conversation if you think the person you're fighting with has ill intents, is a liar, or is dishonest or disingenuous. The minute someone drops that accusation against me, conversation over, unless they retract it. Because really, what's the point? Why are you wasting your breath on someone who you believe to be dishonest? That says two things about you when you approach it that way. Either you're flinging accusations to try to coerce somebody into proving they're not dishonest by letting you get away with bullshit, or you're performing. You're fighting with someone who you know doesn't have good intents. You're not trying to persuade them. You're creating theater for your audience. And that's clout chasing, and that is in itself a form of disingenuousness. You're not looking to have a conversation. You're looking to create confirmation bias for what you perceive is your base. That doesn't solve any problems. Again, this is how not to have a conversation about the Middle East. If you want to perform virtue, if you want to perform righteousness, go ahead and do that. But that's not a conversation. That's talking past someone to appeal to the mob you're trying to whip up. And yeah, I do maintain these things are done with intent. Because if you think about it, it's illogical that you would bother with a person you think is a liar. Nothing good can come of it. They can say they agree with you. They might be lying, right? They could say they mean you no harm. They might be lying. If they're a liar, liars lie. Why are you bothering? It makes no sense on its face. Connected to that is if you are not prepared to be persuaded at all, if you're not looking for some sort of common ground, don't start the conversation, because that's not a conversation in that case. That's a lecture. If all you want to do is pound the other person into paste, to bully them into pretending to agree with you, that is not a conversation. Conversations go two ways. And it's very, very, very important to remember that if you want to be effective. You know, you're not going to get anywhere with someone by demonizing them. You can disagree with their logic, but don't demonize them. Don't claim they're a bad person to their face, because who's going to want to talk to you if you do that? Nobody. A conversation between two people is not a protest line. It's not screaming at politicians. It's not cable news. A conversation is a give and take of information. You have to be prepared to admit when you've made a mistake, be willing to clarify or amend opinions if people point out why there's an issue. You have to be prepared to lead by example, because you can't claim to be an advocate for peace if you can't be an example of peace. If you are coming at someone full bore and going, you're this and you're that, and you hate freedom and you hate this and all that stuff, you're perpetuating the war. You're perpetuating the hurt. You're perpetuating the pain, and you're perpetuating the hate. Your actions are opposing what you claim your desired outcomes are. We don't make peace with friends. We make peace with enemies. And we know what leads to peace. We know in every global conflict, there are books about this from moderators who actually negotiated the settlements and things like, the Good Friday Agreement. It's a real simple calculus. When war is more expensive than peace, there's peace. As long as peace is more expensive than war, there's war. And expense can be emotional cost. So if someone one-on-one has to agree with everything you say to keep the peace with you, they're not going to make peace with you. They're going to fight with you because the cost to their soul is too high to make peace. It is a really simple calculus that is extremely effective. Along those lines, I'm not sure where to go next because the next bits are interconnected. Don't enter into a conversation trying to convert people. Persuasion is a long-term thing. It is much more effective to say, this is what I believe. This is why I believe it. You're entitled to think differently. You can disagree, but I'm going to tell you with respect why I'm coming from where I'm coming from. And that is way more effective than making demands, because that gives the other person, one, an ability to salvage their pride and dignity. Two, it gives them a chance to really think about what you're saying and evolve their position. These things are incredibly emotionally charged, and so they need time to sink in. So the more demanding you are, the less persuasive you're going to be. And those demands are all through conversations. I've had a lot of people demand I read articles. And so I read the article and I give them my honest perspective on the article. And then they'll go, you didn't read it. I read it, dude. I'm a trained journalist. I can sniff out bullshit. An example, and this is just a tangible example, it has nothing to do with whose opinion is right or wrong. Okay? This guy was adamant that I read an article from the Wall Street Journal that he claimed proved Israel funded Hamas in the 90s. Now, there was a huge amount of misinformation that came out during about the era of Arafat, especially after he died. There's another argument that I have people I know who are adamant that Arafat died of AIDS. There's no actual conclusive evidence for that. What they get is some official or another spewing shit. And so, yeah, there are people who said Arafat died of AIDS. There's evidence to the contrary as well. There's a couple of generals that made comments to the Wall Street Journal that money was given to Hamas via Israel. But then there are other people who have pushed back and gone, no, allowing Hamas to become as powerful as it was a mistake, not intentional. We thought the primary threat was Fatah. And so we looked the other way on things, but we didn't actually actively help Hamas. But the general said, okay, people, lefties, because it's lefties that are saying this, Michael Flynn in the US has said a bunch of stuff. Does that make it true? That's an appeal to authority. That just because a famous person says something doesn't make it true. If you only have a couple of accounts of your story, well, something of that nature that happened that long ago, there would be much more evidence than just one or two people saying it by now. This stuff is very leaky. It doesn't stay quiet. There's a reason back in the day when I started, you needed triple sourcing. That went by the wayside in the era of internet journalism. You can run something based on a single comment. And this is the problem with it. Conversations are not school. When you throw an article at someone, you're not talking to them. You're talking down to them. And if you demand someone read, prepare to get some critical thinking pushback on the evidence you've presented. An article existing does not mean someone has to accept it unquestioningly. And that's what it really comes down to. If you're committing a logical fallacy, expect to be called on it. Feeling something strongly does not mean you're right. And people get really embarrassed when somebody pokes holes in an article. And unfortunately, someone like me, who has not only been a journalist, but also an editor and been on both sides of that table, someone like me is going to notice things that a layperson doesn't. And that's okay. But, don't shove an article in front of someone with experience and expect them not to go, okay, here's what I'm seeing here. Because you're expecting that person to accept the authority of someone they can't vet just because it's in the Wall Street Journal. And I'm sorry, papers of record aren't the panacea they used to be. They're more likely to be right, but they make mistakes all the time. I mean, the New York Times published that awful op-ed, but they've published a bunch of awful op-eds. So something appearing in the New York Times doesn't automatically make it right. Something appearing in the Toronto Star doesn't automatically make it right. Somebody accused me of giving the Toronto Star information about myself that I damn well did not. First of all, it was the Globe and Mail that started it, and they published things I didn't want them to because I believed it was not necessary for the story, but also potentially compromise my personal safety. This guy accused me, well, how did they get it if you didn't give it to them? There are other ways newspapers get information, friends. What's the point of saying that? It's dashing the conversation on the rocks. That's not a conversation. That's an attempted conversion. You're lying. You're lying. You're lying. You have to prove you're not lying by admitting you lied, even if you didn't lie. Like, this was a thing that has always been an element of online fights, but now they're creeping into face-to-face stuff as well. This idea of, you lie. No, I didn't. Well, prove it. Well, you can't prove a non-event. Someone can be mistaken and not lying. Based on the deception detection training I've received, most people go out of their way to not really lie. They'll omit, they'll selectively pick their facts. But people who just outright say something that is just flat out the opposite of truth, that's rare. People will dodge, they will deflect, they will try to change the subject, but you know, you need some dark triad stuff going on to actually just flat out lie to someone. So accusing someone of lying, do it at your own peril, because odds are you're wrong, they're merely mistaken, and then you falsely accuse them and you've lost your ability to persuade. The other thing that happens similarly is discounting the other person's feelings. If someone asks you not to use a particular word, if you want the conversation to continue in a productive way, use an alternative. Those are little good faith gestures you can make to make things go more smoothly. And I get pushback about this all the time. What if they're just a snowflake? What if they're too sensitive? What if? Okay, if you think that, why are you trying to talk to them in the first place? What's that going to accomplish? You have to question your intents, really your intents. If you are discounting the other person's comfort, you should never enter into a conversation thinking, oh, that person's just too sensitive, and expect it to be productive. Because what happens, a lot of too sensitive is trauma. And if you're poking at a trauma in someone, you will trigger them, and that will not be productive. That, quite frankly, is cruel. Think about what you're saying. Think about why you're doing things. If you are negatively judging someone going in, you are the problem. Because if you think someone isn't capable of being an equal partner in a conversation, either you have to be better because you think you're superior, or don't start the conversation in the first place. Move on. No one is required to talk to you, and you are not required to talk to anybody else about issues like this. Only start the conversation if you are willing to respect the other person's reasonable requests. And I don't want to talk about this topic right now. It's too raw. Is a reasonable request. Going, too bad, this is social media, it's public, is just going to get you blocked. And you know what? You can't complain about being blocked when you come at it that way. You were in the wrong. Similarly, outright refusing to answer questions in a clear way is not going to get you anywhere good, because there are certain baselines that do have to be established for productive conversations to occur. Because there are certain things like, look, do you believe this? Yes or no? Because if you do, we're not going to get anywhere here. You know, personally, I don't want to talk to anybody who thinks Israel is 100% right or Hamas is 100% right. I don't want to enter into a conversation with either of those two groups. So let's save everybody some time here. If you are in one of those camps, there's no point. Have a nice day. You're entitled to your views. I'm not going to change your mind. Because to me, that is just, there is so much evidence to indicate both those positions are just totally wrong, that I have better things to do with my time. A conversation can only be productive if both parties are willing to give and take. And those hardline positions don't cultivate that. So when someone asks you a question that isn't a gotcha, it's, you can say, look, that's too simplistic. It's more nuanced than that. Here's what I think. But answer the damn question. Because if you won't answer the other person's questions, don't expect them to answer yours. And again, then, what's the point? And the other thing, the final thing I'm going to lead you with about what not to do when you're talking about the Middle East is bloody gish galloping. There is this tactic in the extremes that they like to give you this mini essay with every response, 10 freaking tweets to answer a very simple question that could have been answered in 2 sentences. 1, this messes up Twitter and people won't get notifications for every tweet. It may shut you down for spam and they don't see it at all. But also, that's not conversing with someone. That's lecturing them. People may be in, what's a gish gallop? Okay. A gish gallop is also called proof by verbosity. It's a common fallacy in, I'll say, Western debate. It just, information. And it gives the false perception of something being well researched. But a clearly thought out argument isn't just a buffet of facts. A clearly thought out argument involves taking a bunch of facts, synthesizing them into a thesis that can be tested. And someone who can't lead with that thesis is not actually thinking. They haven't actually really synthesized the reading they have done. One of the ways to describe it is it's a collection of floating abstractions. There's this fact, there's this fact, there's this fact, there's this fact, there's this fact. Okay. You have a jigsaw puzzle full of, jigsaw puzzle is a bad example because a jigsaw puzzle can only be put together one way. That's how most people see individual data points. It's actually not how these things work. It's more like a box of Lego where, and not the shitty Star Wars Lego where you can only build one thing with it and it costs you $120. I'm talking about those old boxes of Lego where these individual facts can be assembled in different ways to provide radically different outcomes and radically different theories. And any good investigator, any good reporter, any good commentator is aware of the other options for where this piece of information can fit. And instead of, I've read, they go, all right, there's this fact. Well, this could mean this, but what else could it mean? Well, it could mean this, this, and this. Okay, I've got 4 possibilities here. I have to eliminate these other 3 before I can even remotely approach even 80% certainty. And then, experience tells me even then I could be wrong. Someone could have lied to me. And reporters do get lied to. God, the number of game devs who lied to my face under direct questioning. I've interviewed politicians. They lie. I've interviewed representatives from nonprofits. They lie. You always have to be open to the fact that someone is lying to you. And some of my favorite stories, I'll spare it because we're going a bit long here, are when certain politicians couldn't even keep the lie up in a 7-minute radio interview. And you can ask little questions here and there and start finding the inconsistencies and then challenge them on the inconsistencies. But the minute too many happen, it's time to go, all right, this is a waste of my time. Have a nice day. Usually I find when you do that, that's when the personal attacks start and the underlying vitriol, the rage, the negative emotion that someone is feeling that is really driving them. That's when it comes out. That's why they feel the need to not answer questions. That's why they feel the need to discount the other person's feelings. This is why they demand you read 8,000 words to be deemed worthy of talking to them. What this is all coming down to is that people are making a conflict happening thousands of miles away across the world about them. They're personalizing it. And I have had to tell members of my own family lately about this stuff, because there's a few cousins that are over there. I have to tell them, this isn't happening to you. You are not there. You are not in danger. You are here. You are safe. Act like it. And if you can't acknowledge that fact, yes, it's scary to see cop cars in the parking lot of every church, mosque, and synagogue you drive by these days. Yes, it's scary to see the amount of bigotry out there that people don't realize is bigotry. There's a lot of dog whistles on all sides. But that is emotional hurt. You know, the reason the cop cars are there is to prevent the violence. And that's a good thing. None of us is there. Some of us can relate to being indirect victims of terrorism from our past experiences. But those of us that, do have some survivor's guilt, we realize it didn't happen to us. And we spend a lot of time questioning why. And nobody chose to be born in Gaza. Nobody chose to be born in Israel. It's not happening to us. And therefore, if you truly respect and care about the people of that region, you will keep your shit together out of respect for them. Now, this does not mean you're not allowed to feel. It's just, if somebody says something horrendously Islamophobic or anti-Semitic to you, it doesn't matter if they realize it or not. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to protect your own emotional equilibrium, and you are responsible for your own emotional regulation. I actually had a guy accuse me of being okay with the Jim Crow South. He knew it wasn't true. He admitted he did it because he was annoyed with me, and he didn't see anything wrong with that. And that is someone who is so emotionally dysregulated. He's not thinking. He's just reacting. He's going out and he needs to hurt someone because he's hurting. These are not people that should be weighing in on this. They're not in the right headspace. And these are not people you have to spend any time with. You can block them and walk away. Because I do think we need to set, if we're going to preach peace, we have to live peace. If we're going to preach restraint, we have to live restraint. We can't tell people who, both Israelis and Gazans and people in the West Bank, Israelis and Palestinians. And I try to keep West Bank and Gaza separate because apples and oranges, right? But everyone there has a reason to resent the other side. If we can't dialogue, if we can't perform peace, if we can't live peacefully and respectfully and with restraint, what business of ours is to tell them they should be able to do something under far more adverse circumstances that we can't do in the relative safety of North America? And that's where I'll leave it. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/Leanna K, or the GoFundMe to fund our discussion groups, starting with men's groups. We're going to expand out from that. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching, and be well.